Not because everyone agreed he was guilty, but because the system had already made up its mind. In his final hours, he didn't ask for freedom. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for something no prison was prepared to allow. Outside those walls, someone was running out of time. Inside them, someone was questioning a truth buried years ago, and somewhere between love, loyalty, and silence, a mistake was about to be uncovered. This isn't just a story about justice. It's about what happens when truth refuses to stay buried. I share new life stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you love it. If you keep listening till the end, the man scheduled to die at sunrise wasn't asking for mercy. He wasn't asking for a miracle. He just wanted to see his dog one last time. Inside Pedra Alta Penitentiary, daylight never truly arrived. A dull gray glow slipped through the narrow prison windows, barely strong enough to tell night from morning. The concrete walls swallowed sound, except for the steady rhythm of guards walking their rounds boots echoing like a countdown. No one needed to announce. Marcos Marcao Oliveira lay chained to an iron bed in the maximum security wing. Thick metal cuffs wrapped around his wrists and ankles, cold against skin that had already learned the shape of restraint. A single hanging bulb buzzed above him, flickering just enough to remind him he was awake. He hadn't slept. Write in the comments and tell me which part of the world you're watching this story from. I'm really interested to see how far this story has traveled. Not really. Every time his eyes closed, he saw the same thing: a sterile white room, a narrow bed, straps tightening across his chest, and a needle sliding into his arm. He knew the procedure by heart. Everyone on death row did. At dawn, they would move him to the final holding cell. At 9 in the morning, they would inject the chemicals. And by 9:15, the state would declare him dead. Marcao exhaled slowly and turned his head toward the small window high on the wall. It was little more than a slit, but a thin line of orange light had begun to creep across the horizon. Morning was coming, whether he wanted it to or not. A guard stopped outside his cell. "You still awake, Oliveira?" the man asked, his voice flat, professional. Marcao nodded. "I didn't sleep." The guard shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Figures." There was a pause, the kind that meant neither of them knew what to say next. "I made my request," Marcao said quietly. The guard didn't look at him. "Yeah, I heard. You think they'll allow it?" The guard sighed and rubbed a hand over his face. "Final requests need approval. Bringing an animal inside the prison isn't standard procedure, especially not in this wing." Marcao swallowed. His throat felt tight. "He's not just an animal." The guard glanced at him briefly before looking away again. "I know." Rajado, the name alone brought a sharp ache to Marco's chest. Rajado wasn't just a dog. He was a Brazilian Mastiff, strong and loyal, with tiger-striped fur and eyes that watched the world like it was worth protecting. Marcao had adopted him 3 years before everything fell apart. 3 years before prison walls replaced morning walks and open skies. "I loved him more than my own life," Marcao said, his voice rough. "Still do?" Footsteps approached from down the corridor. The guard straightened as Director Lucia Ferraz appeared, her posture firm, her expression unreadable. She was a woman known for following protocol to the letter. But even protocol couldn't fully erase the humanity in her eyes. "Marcos Oliveira," she said, stopping outside the cell. "I understand you've made a final request." "Yes, ma'am," Marcao replied. "I want to see my dog. Just once." She crossed her arms. "You understand that allowing an animal inside a high-security prison is highly irregular." "I do," he said. "But I also understand I'm about to die." That stopped her. For a brief moment, the director said nothing. She studied him closely, the hollow eyes, the exhaustion. The man who had spent 5 years insisting he was innocent while the world stopped listening. "Where is the dog now?" she asked. With Clara Viana, Markow replied, "She was my fiancé. She kept him after my arrest. She still takes care of him." Faraz exhaled slowly. "I can't promise anything." "I know," Markow said. "I'm not asking for promises, just compassion." Her jaw tightened. "I'll see what's possible, but don't get your hopes up." Markow nodded. He was too tired to beg, too tired to fight. Still, deep down, something stubborn refused to let go. For 5 years, he had shouted his innocence into rooms that refused to hear him. Maybe this was the last thing he could hold on to, a final moment of love in a place built to erase it. As the director walked away, murmurs drifted through the corridor. Another protest forming outside. A guard muttered, "Half the crowd thinks he's a monster. The other half wants the death penalty gone." Markow closed his eyes. None of it mattered now. The sun climbed higher. The clock kept moving. And somewhere beyond these walls, dog waited, unaware that his owner was counting the last hours of his life. Clara Viana hadn't slept all night. The television was still on when dawn broke. The volume low, but the images sharp enough to cut through her chest. The news anchor's voice was calm. Practice to calm for what she was announcing. The execution of Marcos Oliveira is scheduled for this morning at Pedra Alta Penitentiary. Clara turned her face away. Inside the small rented house, everything felt frozen in time. Half-packed boxes leaned against the walls. An unopened wedding invitation lay buried under old mail on the kitchen table. A future that never arrived, on the living room floor. Rojado slept curled into his bed, his large body rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. His brindle fur looked thicker now than it had years ago. Age had added weight to him, strength too. But his eyes, those watchful amber eyes, were the same. Clara crouched beside him and ran her fingers gently through his fur. "You still miss him, don't you?" she whispered. Rajadu lifted his head, ears twitching at the sound of her voice. His tail thumped once against the floor. He didn't know what today meant, but he felt the tension in the air. Animals always did. 5 years. 5 years since the night everything shattered. The police had found Marcos near the crime scene. A knife, partial fingerprints. Confused witnesses. A motive that never made sense, but sounded convincing enough when spoken confidently in a courtroom. Clara had watched it all unfold like a slow-motion accident she couldn't stop. She had never doubted him. Not once. The evidence felt wrong. Too clean in some places, too vague in others. But truth had drowned beneath procedure, and Marcos Oliveira had been sentenced to death while the city moved on. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Clara froze. For a moment, she couldn't move. The screen lit up again, vibrating insistently. She swallowed hard and answered, "Hello." "Miss Viana," a woman's voice said, firm but controlled. "This is Director Lucia Ferez from Pedra Alta Penitentiary." Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. "Yes, I'm calling regarding Marcos Oliveira's final request." Clara's breath caught. "There's been a change." "No," Faraz said quickly. "The execution will proceed as scheduled." Clara closed her eyes. But the director continued. "Mr. Oliveira requested to see his dog Rojado one last time. He stated that the animal is in your care." Clara nearly dropped the phone. He still wants to see him," she whispered. "Yes," Faraz replied. "This is highly unusual, and I had to request special authorization. The approval is conditional." "I'll bring him," Clara said immediately. "I'll leave right now." "There's very little time," Faraz warned. "You and the dog need to be here within 90 minutes. If you're late, the request will be denied." "I understand," Clara said. Her voice shook, but her resolve didn't. We'll be there. The call ended. Clara stood there for a long second, staring at the silent phone in her hand. Her legs felt weak, but her body moved anyway. She grabbed her coat, found Rajado's leash, and knelt in front of him. "Come on, boy," she said softly. "We're going to see Marcow." Rajado's ears perked up instantly. His tail began to wag, slow at first, then faster. He sensed it something familiar. Something important. The drive to Pedra Alta felt unreal. The roads were nearly empty, washed in early morning light. The sky burned with streaks of orange and pink, beautiful in a way that felt cruel. Clara pushed the speed limit, her hands tight on the steering wheel, in the back seat. Rajado sat upright, staring out the window. Every so often, he let out a low whine, like he was trying to speak. "I know," Clara murmured. "I know." Her phone buzzed again. Friends, messages, missed calls. She ignored them all. Nothing mattered except getting there on time. As the prison fences rose in the distance stall, cold, wrapped in barbed wire, fear clawed at her chest. What if they turned her away? What if she was too late? She slowed as the gates opened, guards watching carefully from their booths. An officer checked her name and waved her through. "Park over there," he said, "and wait." Clara rested her hand on Rajado's head and leaned forward, breathing hard. "Just a little longer," she whispered. "You're going to see him." Rajado pressed his nose against her palm. And for the first time that morning, Clara let herself believe that love might still find its way through steel and concrete. Inspector Renato Barros stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting the knot of his tie with hands that no longer felt steady. For 30 years, he had worn the badge. 30 years of crime scenes, interrogations, confessions, lies, and truths tangled together. The city knew his name. To most people, he was a symbol of justice, reliable, unshakable. But this morning, the man staring back at him looked tired. Haunted today, Marcos Oliveira was supposed to die. Renato checked his phone. No new messages. The last appeal had been denied late the previous night. The execution was set for 9 5 years. 5 years since the case that never left him alone. Back then, everything had seemed solid. Partial fingerprints on the knife. Witnesses placing Oliveira near the scene. A suspicious bank deposit. A motive that made sense on paper if you didn't stare at it too hard. And Renato hadn't stared long enough. He picked up his jacket and hesitated, his fingers brushing against the gold retirement watch resting on the dresser. A reward for a career well served, they'd told him. He hadn't worn it once. It felt undeserved. As he stepped outside, the city greeted him with its usual indifference. Traffic lights changed. Coffee shops opened. Life went on, unaware that a man was counting down his final hours in a concrete box. Renato slid into his unmarked car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. What if we were wrong? The thought had started as a whisper years ago. A strange detail here. An unanswered question there. Testimonies that felt guided instead of discovered. Evidence that closed doors instead of opening them. The victim, Sergio Drummond, had been a powerful real estate developer. Well-connected. Well-protected. The kind of man who made enemies quietly. Too quietly. Renato's phone buzzed a message from an old colleague still inside the prosecutor's office. Last motion denied. Execution confirmed for 9 o'clock. If you're going to do something, do it now. Renato exhaled sharply. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a prepaid phone. One he almost never used. He dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. "Yeah." Came a low, cautious voice. "It's Barros," Renato said. "I need a favor. Fast." There was a pause. "This about Oliveira?" "Yes." A longer silence followed. "Send what you have." Renato drove straight to a public library on the edge of the city. It wasn't open yet, but the Wi-Fi reached the parking lot. He pulled out a flash drive and transferred old case files, financial records, call logs, digital trails that had never been fully analyzed. "I don't need miracles," he muttered. "Just something real." As the files uploaded, memories flooded back. The interrogation room, Oliveira sitting calmly, hands folded, eyes steady. "I didn't do this," the man had said. Not shouting, not begging. Just stating a fact. Renato had seen hundreds of suspects. Guilty men sweated. Innocent men broke. But Oliveira hadn't fit either category. He'd looked confused, like someone waiting for logic to show up. The phone vibrated. "Give me an hour." The message read. Renato typed back instantly. "We don't have an hour. Execution at 9. He started the car again, pulling back into traffic. His heart pounded harder with every red light. If this was nothing, if the trail went cold, then at least he'd know he'd tried. And if it wasn't nothing, he turned toward the courthouse, mind racing ahead. If proof emerged, real proof, he needed to get it to the prison director, or the governor's office, or anyone willing to listen. Even suspicion might. By time, even doubt could stop a needle. His phone buzzed again. Found irregular transfers tied to Drummond. Shell companies. Someone paid well to keep things quiet. Renato's grip tightened. "Damn it," he whispered. This wasn't just sloppy police work. This smelled like a setup. He checked the clock. 7:42 a.m., less than 90 minutes left. Renato accelerated, weaving through traffic, ignoring the knot forming in his stomach. He wasn't thinking about his career anymore, or reputation, or consequences. He was thinking about a man, chained to a bed. About a dog being driven toward prison gates. About a system that rarely admitted mistakes, but sometimes had to, as Pedro Alta's outer towers came into view in the distance. Renato made a decision he'd avoided for years. If the truth existed, he would drag it into the light, even if it destroyed everything he'd built. The final holding cell smelled like disinfectant and cold metal. Marcos Oliveira sat on the narrow bench, his wrists free for the first time in hours, though the relief barely registered. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too clean, as if the room itself was pretending this was something ordinary. A paper bag sat on the small table beside him. His last meal, he hadn't touched it. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second landing like a blow to his chest. Somewhere down the corridor, voices murmured. Doors opened and closed. Life continued its routine, even here. Marcos stared at the opposite wall, forcing himself not to imagine the next room, the one with the straps and the needle. He focused instead on a single thought. Maybe she made it. Footsteps approached the door, clicked open. Director Lucia Ferraz stepped inside first, her expression tight, controlled. Behind her stood a uniformed officer holding a leash, and then Marcos saw him do for a split second. Time stopped. The dog froze in the doorway, muscles tense, eyes locked onto the man in the room. Then Renato let out a sharp bark loud. Urgent hand surged forward, nails scraping against the tile as his tail whipped wildly behind him. "Easy," the officer started to say. But Ferraz raised a hand. "Let him go." Renato didn't hesitate. Marcos dropped to his knees as the dog reached him, wrapping his arms around the thick, familiar neck. Renato whined loudly, half cry, half laugh, licking Marcos' face again and again as if afraid he might disappear. "Oh, champion," Marcos whispered, his voice breaking. "You came. You actually came." Tears streamed down his face freely now. He didn't bother wiping them away. Renato had grown bigger, stronger. His brindle coat was thicker, and there was a small patch of white near his muzzle that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, those deep amber eyes, were unchanged, full of trust. Full of love, Clara stood in the doorway, hands trembling. Watching the reunion she'd dreamed of and dreaded at the same time. "Marcow," she whispered. He looked up at her. Really looked at her, and everything he couldn't say collapsed into that single moment. She looked thinner, tired, but she was there. She had kept her promise. "I tried," she said softly, kneeling beside them. "I tried everything." "I know," Marcow replied. "You did more than anyone." Director Faraz cleared her throat gently. "You have 15 minutes." Marcow nodded, unable to speak. For those minutes, the world outside the room didn't exist. Rajado leaned against Marcow's chest, pressing his weight into him as if anchoring him to the ground. Marcow buried his face in the dog's fur, breathing him in the warm, living scent of loyalty and home. "You kept me alive," Marcow murmured. "Every night in there, I thought about you. Walking you by the creek, teaching you tricks. You gave me something to hold on to." Rajado licked his cheek and rested his head on Marcow's shoulder. The clock ticked on when a soft knock came at the door. Marcow stiffened. Director Faraz stepped closer. "Your time is up." Marcow's chest tightened. He kissed the top of Rajado's head and gently pulled back, forcing his hands away. "I love you," he whispered. "Always." Before the officer could reach for the leash, Faraz spoke again. "Wait." Everyone froze. She glanced toward the observation window, then back at Marcow. "The chaplain hasn't arrived yet. I can allow the dog to stay a little longer until then." Marcow looked at her, stunned. "Thank you." She nodded once. "Protocol." But her voice was softer now. Moments later, Father De Mayo entered quietly, offering a gentle nod. Rajado was guided out reluctantly, letting out a low, mournful sound as he disappeared down the corridor. Marcow watched the door close. He stood there with the chaplain, hands shaking, heart raw. He prayed not for rescue, but for strength. Then the door opened again. Director Faraz returned, her face pale. "Mr. Oliveira," she said carefully, "we've received new information. Your execution has been temporarily suspended." Marcow stared at her. "Suspended." He whispered. "For 2 hours," she continued, "pending verification of new evidence." The room spun. 2 hours, 2 hours alive. Marcow sank back onto the bench, breath coming fast. Fear, hope, disbelief fall crashing together outside the cell. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth, tears flooding her eyes. For the first time that morning, death stepped back, and hope, fragile, terrifying hope, stepped in. Director Lucia Faraz moved fast. She led Clara down the administrative corridor, heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Phones rang nonstop. Guards stepped aside without questions. Whatever was happening, the entire prison felt it. "This doesn't mean he's free," Faraz said, keeping her voice low. "It means we've bought time." "That's all." "That's enough," Clara replied. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. "Time is everything right now." They entered Ferris's office, where Inspector Renato Barros was pacing near the window, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He looked like a man who hadn't slept and probably hadn't planned to. "My contact came through," Barros said immediately. "Bank records, phone pings, shell companies tied to Drummond. Someone paid serious money around the time of the murder." Faraz frowned. "Speculation won't stop an execution." "It's not speculation anymore," Barros said, holding up his phone. "We've identified a name, Valdir Gomes, a fixer, known for planting evidence and cleaning scenes." Clara's breath caught. She had never heard the name before, but it felt heavy the moment Barros said it. "Where was he?" she asked. Barros looked at the screen again. Within 2 kilometers of Drummond's apartment the night of the murder. His phone went dark right around midnight. Silence filled the room. Faraz rubbed her temples. That's enough to raise doubt, but doubt isn't proof. The governor's office will want something concrete. The office phone rang. Faraz answered, listened, then stiffened. Yes, she said. I understand. I'll forward everything immediately. She hung up and turned to Barrows. The prosecutor is on his way. Geddes. Clara asked sharply. Faraz nodded. He wants to see the evidence himself. Moments later, Prosecutor Geddes entered, his face tight with irritation and something closer to fear. He listened as Barrows laid out the findings' financial trails. Digital records, the fixer's proximity to the scene. This isn't enough, Geddes said finally. We convicted Oliveira on physical evidence. Evidence that may have been planted, Barrows shot back. And suppressed. Geddes hesitated. What do you mean? Barrows reached into his bag and pulled out a thin folder. A second forensic report. Never presented at trial. Footprints that didn't match Oliveira. Signs of forced entry. Gunshot residue inconsistent with the knife narrative. Geddes's color drained. This report exists. He asked quietly. It does, Barrows replied, and someone buried it. The room went still. Faraz broke the silence. I'm calling the governor's legal counsel. Now. Minutes stretched into an hour. Calls were made. Files were sent. Lawyers argued on speakerphone. Outside, the clock kept moving toward 11. Finally, Faraz set the phone down. The governor has approved a 40-hour suspension, she said. Full investigation. No execution. Clara collapsed into the nearest chair, tears spilling freely now. Thank you, she whispered. Barrows closed his eyes, relief washing over his face. We stopped it. For now, Faraz corrected. This doesn't erase the conviction yet. Down the hall, Markow waited. When Faraz entered his holding cell again, Rahado lying at his feet, Markow looked up instantly. What's happening? He asked. She didn't delay. Your execution has been suspended for 48 hours. Pending investigation, Markow stared at her. I'm alive? Yes, she said simply. His knees buckled. He grabbed the bench, breathing hard as reality settled in. Rahado jumped up, tail thrashing. Barking as if celebrating something he didn't fully understand, Clara rushed in and wrapped her arms around Markow, holding him as he shook. You're still here? She whispered. You're still here. Markow pressed his face into her shoulder, overwhelmed. 5 years on death row, and suddenly time. I don't know how to live with hope, he said quietly. That's okay, Clara replied. We'll learn. Faraz watched them for a moment before speaking. You'll be moved back to maximum security, not death row. We proceed carefully from here. Markow nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't need to, for the first time in years. The future wasn't a blank wall. It was uncertain, fragile, but it existed. The courtroom was quieter than Markow expected. No shouting. No dramatic speeches. Just the low hum of air conditioning and the scrape of shoes against polished marble. He stood at the defense table, hands no longer chained, but still unsure where to place them. Freedom felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous after 5 years of living inside limits. Clara sat behind him. Leaning forward, fingers locked together. Rahado wasn't allowed inside the building. But Markow could still feel the dog's presence, like a steady heartbeat waiting just outside the door. Judge Amarel adjusted her glasses and looked down at the file in front of her. We are here, she said, to address newly discovered evidence related to the conviction of Marcos Oliveira. Prosecutor Geddes stood slowly. He looked different, now smaller, less certain. Your Honor. Geddes began, clearing his throat. The state acknowledges that material evidence was not presented during the original trial. Specifically, a secondary forensic report indicating unidentified footprints, signs of forced entry, and residue inconsistent with the prosecution's original theory. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Markow felt his breath catch. Geddes continued, his voice tight. Additionally, financial records and digital data now place an alternate. Suspect Valdir Gomez near the victim's residence at the time of death. The state concedes that the conviction can no longer be considered reliable. Clara covered her mouth. Judge Amaral's gaze shifted to Markow. Mr. Oliveira, based on this information, I am granting the motion to vacate your conviction. The gavel came down. You are free. For a moment, Markow didn't move. Then the weight fell off him all at once. His knees weakened. Clara was suddenly there, arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. Cameras flashed as guards stepped back. No longer guarding anything outside the courthouse, sunlight hit his face like something new, too bright. Two Rio Rajado spotted him first. The dog broke into a run. Leash slipping from Clara's hand as Rajado launched himself forward, nearly knocking Markow over. Markow dropped to his knees, burying his face in the thick brindle fur, shaking as everything he'd survived finally caught up with him. We're together, he whispered. We're really together. In the days that followed, the world spun fast. Valdir Gomez was arrested in another state. Under pressure, he confessed paid to stage the scene, paid to plant evidence, paid to make Marcos Oliveira disappear quietly into the system. Names followed, powerful names. Investigations spread like cracks through concrete. Markow stayed mostly quiet. He moved back into Clara's small house. Slept badly at first. Loud noises startled him. Crowded places felt wrong. Some nights, he woke up reaching for restraints that weren't there. Clara never rushed him. Rajado never left his side. One morning, weeks later, Markow stood at the edge of the creek where he used to walk Rajado before everything collapsed. The water moved steadily, uncaring, carrying leaves and branches toward somewhere else. Inspector Boros joined them, hands in his pockets. They're offering compensation, Boros said. Wrongful conviction. 5 years. Markow nodded. Money doesn't give time back. No, Boros agreed. But it can help you build something new. Markow looked down at Rajado, who stood alert and calm, tail swaying gently. I want to help people like me, Markow said. People who don't get lucky at the last minute. Boros smiled faintly. I figured you might. Clara slipped her hand into Markow's. One day at a time, she said. Markow squeezed back. That night, sitting on the porch, Markow watched the sky darken slowly. No bars, no guards. Just quiet. He thought about the man he'd been on death row counting minutes, begging for a last goodbye. He thought about the dog who had carried love through steel and concrete. About a woman who never stopped believing. About a system that nearly erased him and the fragile courage it took to challenge it. The past would always be there, but it didn't own him. Anymore, Rajado rested his head on Marco's knee. Markow smiled, scratching behind his ears. Let's go home, he said softly, and for the first time in 5 years, the word meant exactly what it should.